Okay, so hopefully by the time you've gotten to this, you have already listened to the podcast things for the 7 Steps to a Language Rich Interactive Classroom. And so here is where we're specifically going to take all that, and this is where you're going to learn how to create your first lesson using those strategies and those components. So I wanted to get you in here and go through this. We've done this before live, but right now we're going to do it in a recorded version, so you will always have it for you. So let me go into present and let's get started. Okay, so again, this is from the book, The 7 Steps to a Language Rich Interactive Classroom from John Seidlitz and Seidlitz Education. So while a lot of these things I have used and have kind of tweaked and made them my own, their research is a lot of the foundation for what I'm doing. And it's just good practice. And like it says here, for all classrooms, I really hope that you are not just ELAR teachers, because really this is especially important for all of our classes and not just for ESL students. Okay, so let's see here. All right, so this is basically what you're going to do. You're going to identify the strategies. So you've listened to everything, but then what are some real strategies you can use? Also, I'm going to help you come up with some sentence stems, or just kind of as a reminder, and then create a product. When you are in, you have access to this slideshow. And so right here, when you see these things, you'll be able to click on this and it'll take you to the product page. Okay, so just remember that these strategies will not be nearly as effective if you haven't listened to all the steps and focusing on setting up your classroom environment. Okay, so one of the main things for me when I'm thinking about differentiation and coming up with different strategies for students, in this case, it is a lot of English language learners or English learners. However, I really think that if you've been listening, you'll notice that they have similar struggles as any other struggling student. So to me, where differentiation really starts is not in the application time when your principal comes in and they're watching you and they're doing the observation and they see different groups. It's not that, it's really the planning. And so this is just a reminder of all the different ways that you can do that. And again, as you're going through the slideshow, which you have access to in the shared Google folder, anytime you see these underlined things, please click on them. There are additional resources for you, but I'm not going to read through all of that today. Okay, so moving through, this is, move my little picture maybe, how to write a good sentence stem. So you can see here there are sentence stems that are generic for conversation, but then there are content specific. So again, I remind you, like, take your learning objective, look at the keywords, like in your TEKS, look at that, and you're going to kind of backwards plan from there, and that's how you're going to create your sentence stem. So to me, this is a really good way. If you're looking for alternative methods to taking grades, this is a great place to do it, is in a discussion instead of just looking for that worksheet, because honestly, worksheets may not be aligned with the TEK. You really need to look at that verb. And if it's saying that students need to explain or describe, it's going to be really hard for you to fully meet the essence of that TEK in the rigor level if you're just doing multiple choice or fill in the blank kind of worksheet activities. So to me, speaking and listening opportunity, those are perfect methods to really go to the next level and have them describe what they know, explain what they know, and that's where a lot of learning is taking place. Also in writing. So just make sure that you are looking at the TEKS when you're doing that, and sentence stems really help. So instead of always just having a worksheet or multiple choice or fill in the blank kind of thing, look at those TEKS and then consider how could you use speaking, listening, and writing to help them actually access the TEK. If it says identify, okay, that to me, that makes sense in the TEK. But if it's saying describe, explain, justify, those kind of things, I really think that you need to consider using sentence stems and consider your assessment being something that's not paper pencil. And again, here are different links down there at the bottom for you. Okay, here are some generic ones here. And again, these are just things that you can use. You will need to use, for those of you that are using this to create a lesson plan based on what I've given you for your product, you will need to incorporate sentence stems, so come back here. Okay, randomizing and rotating. Again, that's one of the steps in the 7 steps that we've already talked about. So there are tons of options. I did a little Twitter poll to see popsicle stick, which you can do digitally. Also, drawing cards. Lots of people like the wheels. There's name generators, and all these, again, we've talked about. And then again, here are some articles and research if you are interested in expanding on all of this. Okay, total response signals. There's a whole podcast episode about that. Here's a link for your research, and then also here's just some examples. And you will need to use a response signal in your lesson plan. So this is a place that you can go, and it's not limited to this. These are just examples. That's my favorite thing about this kind of stuff, is that this isn't meant to tell you what to do. It is there for you to anchor to if you need a starting place, which I think is great. But it's also to inspire your ways of thinking and in your creative approach and really the art of your teaching. So this is just a springboard for you also. But if you're struggling, you can always anchor to some of these things that are here. And then as you develop your own intuition and practice, then you get to be who you want to be. And then you'll be telling me the things that you've come up with, and we can add those to our bank of things to choose from. Okay, so here are actual classroom strategies for structured conversations, reading, and writing. And this is so they explicitly incorporate language into what you're doing. So there's lots of different ones, and you may find that some fit better for what you want to do or others. And you're probably going to end up using a variety of these, or at least I hope so. And some of these are going to be for older students, and some of these may be for younger students. And some will fit better for ELAR classrooms, and some will not. Some are actually better for content specific. So we're just going to go through a few of these so you can see some options. Okay, so here's a list, and let's move my face out of the way. So here's a list of them. And so when you click on these, if you're going back through, all these will click and take you to the specific ones, okay? So somebody wanted, so to me, this is good for summarizing. And before you skip over it because you think that this is only ELAR, I really want my history teachers to think about this, because to me in history, when we think about conflict and things that have happened, and somebody wanted something, but there was a conflict, and then what happened? Okay, so this is retelling. It's not just like a first, next, then, and last. This is really looking at the, oh my goodness, like the rising action, the climax, the conflict, and all of it. So this really helps you retell that, and I've even talked to some people about how you can start pairing this with a visual of the plot chart. There we go. So this really helps you go with the plot elements. But again, like I said, for history teachers, I really think that you could see where you could use this as a retelling of historical events as well, because it's kind of the central theme of people wanting things and there being conflict. So basically, you can have it pretty simple like this, where it's just short phrases that kind of go together to make a big sentence. So I did an ELAR example, and then here is a historical example. And then, again, here's some information. So you can see these pieces, somebody wanted, but so. And so you can go here, and that comes into a sentence. And as you're doing this, if people are saying this and you're guiding them along the way, it helps them to think about the plot in a pattern. And so we're kind of mind mapping for them. So they're going to start trying to pick up on these elements, because these should be present in pretty much every story that we're reading. There's multiple versions of this. There's multiple plot lines going on in fiction, especially as you get more complex. So again, speaking of more complex, here's one where there's a lot more detail, and so it goes together. Now, I have this just little plug right here. It says chat with me on Twitter. This takes you to my Twitter page. And I have one where we were just kind of interactive, just practicing doing some with novels. I'm a big reader, so novels that I'm currently reading. So these are just little 10-second twists. As you can see, this isn't your whole lesson, but it's a way to insert something to just double check for comprehension. And again, when you're incorporating that language, you're incorporating the whole child, their whole brain, and you're the chance that this is going to stick and be embedded learning is much more increased than if it's just paper pencil regurgitated information. So sometimes I'll try to practice, you'll hear me call them 10-second twists, because they're just little additives or maybe sometimes tiny shifts to what you're already doing. And so I want to be here to help you do that. All right, scanning. I talked about this one. And so this is the focus of this is when you're looking for new words. I know we do skimming kind of as a pre-reading activity, but this is really, you're trying to get students to focus on words that they might not know, that they feel like they need to understand in order to know what the text is talking about. So the big factor with this is that you're going to read from back to front. The reason for that being is when we read, we sort of start filling in what we anticipate, especially the stronger that we are as readers. So we don't want kids to, and they start using their tactics that they do to compensate when they don't understand. And we don't really want to do that. We want to isolate. And so when they go back to front, they're not reading for understanding. They're just reading for words and looking for words. So they're able to focus on that. And then here are the steps for that. So that might be one. This is really good for academic text. All right, problem solution teams. These are things that I feel like this is a little bit more advanced. And also as we get into this, I'm going to kind of show you how you can do this digitally, or you can do it in person, and you can do it synchronously or asynchronously, depending on what your needs are as we are moving forward. So basically they're reading an article about a problem, or they could be reading a word problem in math or some kind of scientific problem scenario. And then you give them sentence stems and they work on solving it in a group. I'm not going to read over a whole lot of this just because it's here for you. I'm just kind of trying to talk to you about the main idea of what we're doing here. So as you can see, if you're doing it synchronously, you can do it in your classroom on Google Meet. Also asynchronous and Flipgrid, you can kind of split it up that way. But the goal is for them to work together, and you predetermine sentence stem. So when you go through it, that way you're facilitating the kind of discussion and conversation that you want them to have. Okay, expert novice is kind of similar to that in a way, as far as the level it is for students and the rigor that it will be. And so it's again kind of about problem solving. So it's not just ELAR. You can also be doing it in math, science, or maybe you might have them try to resolve a problem in history, however you'd like to do that. But you're going to kind of divide them up into who's the expert and who's a novice. So part of this is thinking kind of how we do as teachers. We're thinking, okay, as we're teaching this subject, what are the hard parts going to be? Or where do people tend to make mistakes? Or what's the most confusing part? So it's kind of allowing for students to openly talk about what was confusing or what was difficult. And so then you help them practice being the novice and asking questions about the difficult parts. And then experts have to articulate that. Once again, once you're taking on that expert teaching role, you are fully immersed in learning and you're really embedding knowledge. And so you're helping people and you're demonstrating how to ask questions and things like that. So I like this one too. It's probably a little bit more advanced. And again, it's capitalizing on sentence stems. So this is there for you to read. You can also be talking about, this is good for when you're talking about solving something that requires a procedure. So math and science teachers, this could really be for y'all also. Okay, talk show is interviewing. And one reason I like this is that question asking is a skill, and is a skill that we need in language. And sometimes we aren't that great at it. In fact, just so you know, for students who exit the ESL, one of the things, a part of their test is having to produce questions about topics. And so this is a skill. And it also helps them with conversation. And honestly, kids need more explicit practice in formal conversations because we don't always do it. So, and again, there's some examples for how you can do this synchronously or asynchronously. Raft is my nerdy favorite. So this could be done for anything. It might seem a little cheesy for you in math class, but I really like it. And you can really differentiate this in so many different directions, but it is highly engaging, and you can, and you can, like, from lower level to upper level. This is one of those things. I really think you're going to like it. So Raft each one of these letters stands for something, and let me show you. Okay, so it stands for roll. audience, format, and topic. So you can see here, let me see if I can move myself a little bit. So, okay, I'm back. So you can see here, let me go back one slide, I apologize. Okay, so you can see all these different subjects, including I even put PE. So, and class is not normally on there, just kind of wanted to show you. So role would be who they are going to be. So you can pretend, you can do lots of this. Now this can be structured writing. It could also be speaking, but in conversation. But I definitely think writing, it's good in all content areas. And before they talk, sometimes I think it's good for them to have that. So you can see, like, you can be yourself and who's your audience, and then what format, and then what topic. A pointer, and I talked about this a little bit in a podcast, but just as a reminder, when you're using a new strategy, it's always good to try to do it with something that they're familiar with. So the first time you do this, you probably want them to be talking about something that they know a lot about. So their topic, summer vacation, being themselves is also going to be better. And then you can change it up in the rigor. So you've got, even in math, like I said, it's a little bit cheesy, but they can pretend to be a triangle. Okay, so back to the math thing. You can pretend to be a triangle, and then your audience, you're talking to other shapes. And look here, I love this. Now it's persuasive. And you're telling them, why can't you be a square? So even think about that. Even if you're little kids, having to have them articulate why the triangle is not the square. If they can do that, look how much learning is taken place right there. And then if you just ask them this question, couldn't you assess their learning pretty quickly on various levels without the worksheet? Another one that I loved here, incorporating how-to writing. And so in social studies, you're a Native American chief, your audience is the younger tribesman, you're doing how-to, and you're teaching how to survive, different things like that. And so what I love about this is you could have everybody in class might have the same topic, but you could have different formats. Like this could be the variable. I mean, you could really, like, you could have them draw different roles and just kind of almost like Mad Libs, like come up with random combinations and just how different it would be. I feel like at the end of the year, this would be a good time, or sporadically through the middle of the year, once you've learned a couple of these formats of writing, to revisit them, but in a fun way. So it's not just review. It's like, okay, you add a new one in the hat of what format could I possibly draw from. So I love Raft. I mean, I totally geek out. I'm going to show you one more example where everything is kind of themed around a topic. And so you might do it that way. That's this next page. Okay, so everything here is kind of like restaurant, employee, customer. And then you can see here, like a lot of it could be digital. And so you've got a Yelp review, which to me, I mean, that's very real world application, things that they're really going to see, having to send emails. There's different kind of emails, like a complaint, different roles. Again, you can see this, but I just wanted to talk to you about how this could look digitally as well, and doing some real world applications, because writing is important. But what if we, for those 21st century learning, what if we kind of bridge that together, where now it's like we're writing emails, we're writing reviews, things like that they would really use and see. And I feel like this is, again, I know I'm being a little nerdy about it, but I feel like it's a great way to gain interest and engagement, which is always good. All right, QTripleSi is how you say this. So this is a structured conversation, and it really incorporates all the pieces. So let me just show you here. I've talked about this one before. So here's some examples. This is actually from one of the infographics. Here you can read some more. But you're going to be using stems, you're going to be using signals. And just remember, assess does not mean a paper pencil test. It's just, how are you going to know what they know, kind of thing. And this could be like 40 seconds. It could be so a little longer than 10-second twist, or you could use this for the entire cycle of your lesson plan for that day, just depending on how you want to pace it, the rigor. But you could also really quickly go through it. This is something that you would want to practice. And your kids would know, like, we're going to QTripleSi this. And so they're going to know kind of what to expect. Again, start with something familiar and move from there. So you've got question, stem, signal, sharing, and assessing. So a lot of times your sharing can be one of those randomizing and rotating strategies too, as well as your assessment. Again, here's another resource about QTripleSi. I highly recommend. Okay, and this one's for synchronous learning, what you're doing when you're doing it face-to-face live. Okay, so you've got digital chats that you can be doing in the chat box in your Google Meet if you're doing it, if you're not in face-to-face. Or you could be face-to-face and you might have like their little digital where they can be chatting while they're in class and see the chats going up as well. And then asynchronously, so like what we're doing now, and you can have a slow chat and a discussion board, slow chat in Twitter, things like that. And so like your signals digitally would be thinking like thumbs up or go like something, like a post, things like that. Again, I gave you an example of what people do in their free time if you're starting out doing this, because that's something that is familiar to them. This right here is a different link, just so you know. All right, writing windows is something that I like. I showed one in my live session, but you're gonna have a great inspiring graphic, something kind of eye-catching. And I got mine from Unsplash. They're really cool because they're people that are trying to be famous photographers, and so they allow you to use their images for free. Sometimes they just kind of ask you to like quote them or something like that. So, but it's just how there's several different ways you can do this. You can kind of do it pretty simply. So here's an image, and then you kind of go through and like as you're looking at it, what are some things you might see here? Like, so you're doing a lot of imagery. You can talk about verbs, other phrases, and then you can give them a sentence stem. You can give them some sentence stems to write about it. That's one way to do it. Or you can do this as a group activity, maybe like in history or something like that, where there's a theme. So here, this is about the old mission in San Jose. So there's different pictures of the same mission, and they go through the same processes here. And then you can give them pretty rigorous sentence stems, and they could get kind of where they have to do some creative thinking and pretending, almost like Raft. And then without the kids seeing their pictures, they read their little story or synopsis that they've come up with based on their sentence stems. Another thing that you could do is maybe after they've done this and as they're sharing, maybe have the pictures mixed up on the table and the kids are having to guess whose perspective that's written from or which picture. So I like writing windows. It's a good structured writing activity. Okay, so creating your product, for those of us that are in Robinson ISD and need to change the date for the June summit, they had to turn it in by June 19th. And so it is a requirement for your comp day credit if you're doing this one. So, all right, so let's talk about your product. So again, when you're doing this, we are doing this as you're doing this at your own pace, but know that you can always call or contact me, and I'm going to make sure that I've gone through all the instructions. So it's best to have watched or listened to all of the podcasts first and read those infographics, and then you're going to use what I've done with this. And I have there's a link, and I'll show you to create your product. Okay. So your product you're going to need to pick a strategy that you will use for an identified content objective. I really want you to use this. So I don't want this to be something that is totally separate that you never use again. I want this whole concept to be something very productive and valuable to you. So choose an objective that you're going to be teaching. You might do it at the beginning of the year, or maybe it's one of those that you've always just kind of struggled for kids to understand. But you're going to do it at some point this year. You could choose that as well. Okay. You're going to have to. So right here is where, if you click on this, it's going to take you to that slide. Randomizing and rotating strategy. Again, click on this. It'll take you to the slide. Sentence stem. Click on this. It'll take you to the slide. And then right here, completing this form, and I'll go back and show you in just a minute. That is a Google Doc, and it's going to make you make your own copy, share with me, and that's also what you share when you turn in if you're in the summit. Okay, if you're watching this and you aren't in the summit, yay, thanks for doing this, and you can just share it with me via email or through Google as well. Okay, and then I've had some questions that were specific to math. So here's a couple of those. And then we also have some things for what we do for our younger students if they're not reading yet. Just remember, everything that you do is great in modeling, and maybe you're just starting at the speaking level for some of this stuff and not writing because they're not writing yet. And that is okay, because we really, if we want to be good writers, it's going to be really hard to write things that we can't say. So if you're at a non-reader level, just doing some of these activities, but in a speaking only format is still so incredibly helpful. And I encourage you to do this. Also, the more you incorporate visuals, that will also help. And then the Jamboard, I'm going to leave this open for anybody who ever does this. It's in the Google Doc. But you can see other people's questions. So sometimes that will make you think of ideas or their comments as well. And then Word Wall, we've talked about Word Wall a little bit, but just as a reminder, and I do this all the time, if you're going to have a Word Wall, make it interactive and continuously update it. If it gets to the point where you've noticed that you haven't changed it in a few weeks and you just can't keep up, which usually happens to me about October, then just go ahead and take it down. Make sure that whatever's up there is actually going to be something that's useful. Okay, so